So good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is a fantastic opportunity to present this very innovative session to you. The University of Pennsylvania is running a 2-week conference, the Global Oral Health and Climate Action Conference, parallel and during the main conference that's happening in Belém, Brazil. And the idea of all these sessions is to generate policy recommendations, some action points that will be collated and then feed back into bigger agendas in WHO and also government agendas. So the material coming out of this session will be very much utilized and taken forward. As COP30 presidency said, we need to go from talking to action and implementation. And this, I understand, is really at the heart of this agenda. So without further ado, I will hand back to Valentina and wish you success for this tremendous session that you put together.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you for this opportunity. And I would like to invite our co-chair, Dr. Elin from Norway, to start this presentation and to introduce our speakers for today.
Thank you so much, Valentina, and hello everyone around the world. Today we come together with a shared commitment to climate resilience prevention, the visionary principle and knowledge of what it takes to ensure holistic health, all in the best interest of both children and the planet. As an advocate for children's rights to quality early childhood education and planetary well-being, I'm honored to serve as the moderator for today's webinar with you world-leading experts on a variety of approaches to our webinar on early childhood education as the first line of NCD and climate resilience prevention. My role as a doctor and professor of early childhood pedagogy and as the director of the Kintnow Research Center for Systemic Research on Education for Diversity and Sustainable Futures in Norway has reinforced my belief that in the critical importance of this topic. And I truly believe that the session today will fuel my energy even more. I will remind us all of the WHO UNICEF Lancet Commission, led by Helen Clark, stated in 2020, a future for the world's children. They write, despite dramatic improvements in survival, nutrition, and education over recent decades, today's children face an uncertain future. Climate change, ecological degradation, migration population, conflict, pervasive inequalities, and predatory commercial practices threaten the health and future of children in every country. And in the faces of this polycrisis, which significantly impacts early development, it is essential to create opportunities for bodily and emotional resilience and for joining forces across disciplines, sectors, and national borders. So I'm genuinely excited about the relevance and urgency of our discussions today and a response to this uncertainty as knowledge workers gathered here, becoming global agents for sustainability by sharing our insights and evidence. Because it is evident, beyond any doubt, that early childhood education is vital, not only for children's development and education, but also for fostering long-term resilience in our societies. So, through this webinar, we aim to raise awareness about the significance of early childhood education and emphasize that children's best interest must matter more in policy making and in everyday practices. The Bangkok Declaration from last year expressed the urgent need to intensify efforts to mitigate the substantial health, social, economic, and environmental impact of oral diseases and health systems and societies. So As a response to these concerns, we will explore recent research, insights, and ideas helpful to enhance, protect, and innovate actions, policy, and the pedagogy within the early years institutions, as well as the ecosystemic levels of society, for the supports of child life and holistic nature of development. This encompasses essential aspects such as early cognitive and social growth, foundational learning, responsive care, responsible innovation, nutrition, health, safety, and protection. And I will also mention play, because we must not forget the meaning and joy of life in all the serious concerns. Through our conversations today, we will uncover how empowering children to care for self-protection, care for others and the planet can lay the groundwork for resilient communities and societies. And we will examine a broad range of conditions fostering international collaboration to tackle the threats and challenges facing future generations. Thank you very much for that. And now we are going to the next speaker. And that is Karen Spruyt from a National Institute of Medicine and Health and the University of Paris, France. This will be a session that is pre-recorded, and the title of it is Sleep Equity, the Overlooked Frontier in Child Health.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this event. I am Professor Karen Spruyt and work at the French National Institute of Health, INSERM, in Paris. I regret that I can't be present in person, but I'm delighted to share my perspective with you. Long before modern science, we have August Kerner, who recognized that sleep reflects cellular homeostasis. We saw it as an barometer, and that difficulty sleeping may signal early systemic dysregulation, or as he wrote it, a state of disease somewhere in the complicated apparatus. Today we know that Kerner's intuition was right. Sleep does reflect our biological balance, and its disruption mirrors wider inequities in health and environment. For instance, based on aggregated data from over 1.1 million individuals, 1 in 4 people gets less sleep than recommended for their age. Or actually, for children, it is 1 in 3, while only 5.8% sleep outside the acceptable sleep duration range. Another study showed that lower income to needs ratios are linked to more reported sleep-wake problems in children. Neighborhood disadvantage, such as fewer greener spaces, predicts poor sleep quality and shorter sleep duration across development. My own research showed that family resources, such as caregivers' time to self, money, and basic needs, influence consistency of timing and duration of sleep, as well as quality of children's sleep. So in the following, I will outline the science of sleep, its relevance for health, the consequences of its disruption, and how these patterns reveal broader questions of sleep equity. So first, a brief overview of the anatomy of sleep, highlighting 2 key pathways, that is, the arousal pathway and the sleep pathway. So 2 wake signal branches exist. Branch number 1, the neurons in the upper pons produce acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter, activating the thalamus, which channels signals to the cerebral cortex, the seat of arousal and consciousness. Second branch will actually make that also the brain awakes. So here, in the second branch, the peptides, other neurotransmitters, reinforce that arousal system, so priming the cortex to receive signals from the thalamus. And as a result, these 2 branches produce our wakefulness, the arousal pathway. During the day, the brain tires, and this is under homeostatic control and circadian control. So as the energy carrier ATP breaks down, the adenosine builds up and triggers neuron activity in the VLPO. Under the circadian control, we know that the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the brain's master clock, containing neurons that fire in a 24-hour cycle to influence that VLPO. It is controlled by signals from the retina during the day and by melatonin from the pineal gland at night. So the brain sleeps. This means that the VLPO neurons are activated. This means that they release GABA and galanin, and so they will inhibit that ascending arousal pathway system, or that arousal branches that we just discussed. So this switch is influenced actually by environmental cues that we also call sidegapers. And they can be both intrinsic as well as extrinsic. So intrinsic could be internal biological signals, such as body temperature, cortisol, or even that sleep propensity, but as well as social interactions or lifestyles and activity. Another one that is very much known is the sleep hormone. So the interlinked biorhythms, they synchronize really that flip-flop system where melatonin plays a crucial role in aligning our circadian rhythm. At the same time, as I just mentioned, neurochemical balances they regulate our sleep pressure, so the homeostatic sleep pressure. And this not to make that switch between wake and sleep or sleep and wake, but also to help orchestrate the transitions between different sleep stages, such as the non-REM sleep and the REM sleep. As a result, over the course of the 24 hours, what we have is that the sleep pressure gradually builds up, making the brain and the body increasingly tired. Eventually, this pressure reaches a tipping point, and that is where the circadian signals, such as, for example, decreasing daylight, they combine with the sleep pressure will flip the brain into that sleep state. So why does sleep matter? Well, sleep is actually measured based on our brain waves, on the eye movements, muscle tone, and cardiorespiratory function. And so based on these biosignals, we can create or we can recognize the structure in our sleep, the architecture, sleep architecture, where we can recognize stage N1, stage N2, stage N3, or how the sleep, the non-REM sleep, the non-rapid eye movement sleep, gradually becomes more deeper. And so what is the characteristic of this non-REM sleep? Well, we see that the eye movements are slow, the muscle tonus is reduced, and the cardiorespiratory functions are slow and regular. But during sleep, we are also in a more paradoxical state or behavior, where we see that the eyes are random and fast, or eye movements are random and fast, that the muscle tone is absent, and a fast and irregular cardiorespiratory function. And that is what's called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. So based on these features, we have also learned that sleep state is not static, that it changes across the life's course, reflecting developmental, physiological, and behavioral shifts from infancy to adulthood. As you can see on the scheme, as a newborn, you're in your sleep, you spend around 50% of your time in REM and non-REM sleep. So the proportion of your sleep is 50-50 REM and non-REM sleep. And as you can see, this changes over the course of your life. Now, why does it really matter that sleep? And why is it so important, particularly in childhood? Well, developmental neuroscience shows us that there are sensitive periods. This means times where certain brain functions reach peak maturation. Interestingly, these periods coincide with the times we spend much of our day asleep. In other words, sleep is an essential pillar of health, just like nutrition and physical activity. One may even say, I sleep, therefore I am. Sleep supports brain development, emotional regulation, memory consolidation, and while also regulating hormones and the immune system, such as the growth hormone and cortisol. Circadian rhythm entrainment begins in infancy. Yet, despite all we know, we still do not know fully or still do not fully understand what constitutes normal or optimal sleep for healthy development, a question that lies at the heart of my research here at INSERM. An increasing body of research is showing the serious health consequences of that disrupted sleep. So from cognitive and emotional difficulties to metabolic as well as immune dysregulation. So in a nutshell, in children and adolescents, disrupted sleep affects 15 to 44%, with diagnosed insomnia in about 11%. Asymptomatic sleep disturbances reported in up to 40% of the cases. Obstructive sleep apnea affects up to 6% of the children, with higher rates of sleep disturbances and complaints among those with developmental disabilities and rare disorders. In adulthood, particularly young adults, are vulnerable, with around 14.8% to 26.4% experiencing nightly insomnia, while obstructive sleep apnea affects 18%. Now, across all ages, women are more likely than men to experience sleep disturbances. Now, why it is so important is that the widespread sleep disturbances come with a significant economic burden, estimated at 178.5 to 184 billion euros. So some time ago, I conducted an umbrella meta-review showing that both sleep duration and sleep disorders, and particularly sleep-related breathing disorders, are consistently associated with adverse health outcomes. For example, children that snore all the way to those that have obstructive sleep apnea syndrome, that is, those children that have experienced brief breathing stops during sleep, they show moderate to severe impairments in memory, attention, language skills, and IQ. In my own work, I found that sleep variability, or the irregularity of several of the sleep features, it is linked to an increased risk of cardiometabolic syndrome. This is putting children at risk for obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Both literature and my studies also show that sleep fragmentation, timing of sleep, are associated with socio-emotional behavioral problems. While napping is increasingly investigated, it does not fully substitute for nighttime sleep due to its circadian timing. Sleepiness, though less studied, has been linked to poor school performance, and experimental studies further support these findings, where sleep restriction or sleep deprivation leads to cognitive deficits, such as decreased vigilance or problems with working memory, learning, abstract thinking, and delayed memory recall. We also see that sleep extension improves vigilance, memory, and cognitive flexibility. Taken together, despite these heterogeneity amongst the studies, it was very clear that poor sleep already has a moderate adverse effects across multiple developmental domains. And with better study designs, I am very much confident that the true effect size is even larger. Bringing me to that overlooked barrier. So, during a recent presentation, I was reminded of the Occam's razor, and I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's a principle I first encountered in my philosophy classes, also known as the principle of parsimony. It emphasizes simplicity in problem solving. From my perspective, this translates into creating health as the simplest approach to managing disease. In that spirit, my talk strongly advocates for a collective mobilization to prioritize sleep as a foundational pillar of health. To better understand this overlooked frontier, I draw on Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory, visualized as concentric circles showing how an individual development is shaped by interconnected environmental systems. One key layer is a chronosystem. It captures environmental events, life transitions, social historical circumstances. Environmental events include natural disasters such as hurricanes or earthquakes. Transitions encompass major life changes such as divorce or the death of a family member. So socio-historical circumstances refer to significant social or historical events that occur during a person's life and influences development. The best examples I can give here are COVID-19 or the pandemic reshaping children's sleep with later bedtimes, irregular routines, and increased sleep disturbances. A review showed that the last 100 years, sleep duration in childhood decreased with about 73 minutes per year. At the microsystem level, cultural, societal contexts shape children's sleep. Factors include whether a country is developing or industrialized, socioeconomic status, poverty, ethnicity, and the broader social norms and economic systems. As noted earlier, a lower income to needs ratio is linked to more reported sleep-wake problems in children. Other influences include neighborhood economic deprivation, minority status, community violence, discrimination. All are associated with poor sleep quality. Interestingly, children in Europe, North America, and Australasia tend to have earlier bedtimes, earlier wake times, and longer nocturnal sleep than children in Asia and the Middle East. However, I need to make a comment here because there are notable differences even within regions. At the exosystem level, influences on the child are indirect. They are usually affecting the child through other people in their life. One example is what Robert Meadows called the negotiated night, a term I really like, because this refers to what goes to elements about negotiation. So who goes to bed when, in terms of the shift workers, or who cares for a child in terms of the new composite families, whether to co-sleep or to sleep separately, when sleeping arrangements become a site of negotiation, which reflects power dynamics, gender roles, bodily rhythms, and social expectations. At the mesosystem level, we focus on the interconnections, those interconnections between the different environments surrounding the child. For example, ethnicity can moderate the impact of economic adversity on children's sleep, while stress also acts as a moderator. Other studies have shown that sleep quality is linked to heart rate variability, or family conflict can predict later insomnia. In this way, the outer layers of the ecological system interact with the inner layers, bridging broader societal influences and with the individual outcomes on the short and on the long term. So really look at the impact from the outer to the inner circles, and this on short and long-term events. At the microsystem level, influences directly affect the child. And these include marital hostility or hostile parenting, school start times, extracurricular activities, or the sleep setting itself, and many others. So these have immediate settings with interactions and a direct impact on the child's sleep and overall development. And at the core of this system theory, we can put the child's sleep, their individual need for sleep, and as such, I believe that 21st century health identity lacks sleep. And this brings me to my conclusion. And I would like to invite you to join the sleep initiative, and so to bring that sleep-wake perspective at the primary care level. That is, we screen and question how much sleep there was over the 24 hours. or how difficult it is to fall asleep, to stay asleep, or to wake up. Other questions could be when does sleep or the wakefulness occur during that 24-hour period. Next, is there consistency in sleep and wake features? For example, regular bedtimes. So is the focus, attention, or the performance maintained during the waking hours? Another element in that sleep-wake mnemonic that I propose is asking about what the subjective perception of the individual sleep or wakefulness is, how the person perceives their sleep and their wake state. We should never overlook age-related changes. Also important is who is affected, who is diagnosing, and what interventions have been attempted. And lastly, in this screener would be what are the conditions and settings for sleep. Why do I believe that this sleep-wake mnemonic and screening tool can actually help is because up till today, there is too often a sleep and sleep problem remains often undiagnosed and not routinely assessed. Hope I can convince you of the importance of sleep equity, and I would like to thank you for your attention.
So now we thank you, Karen. You convinced me, at least. It was very interesting to listen to all these insights on the often overlooked aspects of holistic health for the sleep. So thank you for that.